Responding to the call of the Varian King Volsens, who is now seeking asylum in the city of Navarone following the loss of the Varian capital, the protagonist of Berwick Saga, Reese, son of Margrave Burnstone of Sinon, leads a small detachment of less than 100 warriors to answer the call of duty since his father is tied up in the Western Front. Stopping by Izerna village right before the gates to Navarone, Reese learns that this village is currently under attack by Varian deserters, and the visiting priestess, Sister Izerna, is nowhere to be found. Stepping in to defend the village from looting deserters, Reese's journey begins with Chapter 1 main, A Reason to Fight. Objective: seize the house in the center of Izerna village. You start on the left-hand side of the map with no enemies in sight. There is a shop near your starting location that sells some very low quality weapons for the early game that you can use for replenishment purposes in a pinch, but I will recommend saving your money for now. The house in the middle of the village is guarded by Richens, the boss of this map. He must be defeated to open up the seize point. To do this, we have most of the Knights of Sinon, starting with the protagonist and his right-hand man, Reese and Ward, respectively. The main character, Reese, is a very stellar combat unit. Definitely not a Roy, but not quite a Sigurd. More like a POR Ike or an Ephraim, and has some invaluable support skills that will massively increase your entire army's reliability, while Ward is essentially the Berwick Saga version of Jagan, the strong pre-promote that can more than hold his own. Ward's starting stats are monstrous, so much so that even in the final map of the game, a stat line like this would still be considered good. Note that in Berwick Saga, with only 2 exceptions, Reese and Ward are unavailable for deployment in any side chapters. This means that these two are only playable in 17 out of the game's 37 total maps. However, both of these units are excellent enough that this deployment limitation doesn't really stop either of them from being good. Next up are your 2 Christmas calves, Adel and Leon, with distinctively different skill sets. Adel is a unit that relies on speed thanks to Vantage. In Berwick Saga, units may not counterattack if they were damaged in combat, meaning that if Adel goes first with Vantage and lands a hit, the enemy that initiated combat will not be able to attack. Making good use of Adel therefore relies on keeping his attack speed higher than the enemy's. Leon, on the other hand, has the active skill Deathmatch to force an enemy into 5 consecutive rounds of combat. He therefore requires good combat stats to ensure that he can consistently deathmatch enemies and not die in the process. Note that both Adel and Leon have identical promotion requirements, but these stat requirements are considered very high and would require significant investment to make them both work in the long run. Finally, Sherlock is your mounted archer, who has a slew of very powerful skills unique to him. Double Shot and 1-2 are 2 combat skills that no one else in the game have, and allows Sherlock to output a lot of attacks in a single turn, making him an incredibly high DPS archer unit that can hit and run thanks to being mounted. He does require some investment and attention to reach that optimal DPS level, but he is certainly no slouch once fully trained. On turn 2, a cutscene will introduce 2 new playable characters that will appear on the right-hand side of the map. Izerna has been rescued and is being protected by the mercenary Dean, but their positions are very precarious. Dean is a very powerful playable character. In the Japanese community, he has gained the nickname of Axe Navarre, having all the power output expected of a fighter class character, but also all the speed stats typical of speedy sword fighters. He is bundled with some key offensive skills that let him become one of the few characters that can actually attack more than once per combat. Dean outputs ludicrous damage all game long. His recruitment condition is also not happiness based, and incentivizes using him for a long time to come. Izerna is your playable cleric, and the only healer available to you for some time. While she is exceptionally fragile and lacks some of the defensive passives that later recruitable healers have, she does have access to Blessing, and healing in general makes her an indispensable part of your army whenever she is available. Though you might find that occasionally, trying to protect the cleric with no defensive capabilities can be a massive burden, especially since clerics in Berwick Saga only have 3 movement. On turn 3, a cutscene will play at one of the houses in the village, followed by a time limit displayed. You have until turn 15 to reach and interact with that house to gain the rewards inside. This is an exceptionally generous time limit given to the player, and you should not have any problems getting there on time. Remember that units must dismount before moving onto a house tile, and that for this particular house, whoever enters it must enter a round of deathmatch combat, which is to say 5 consecutive combat rounds in a row against an enemy inside. As a general rule, in any of these building investigations that lead to combat, the unit cannot die as a result of this fight, even if they lose. But the reward can only be gained if they survive or win the encounter inside. The enemy in this house is quite weak and can be easily dealt with by any fighting unit in your army. On turn 4, Elbert and Christine will join the party from the top left corner of the map. Elbert is a powerful sword cavalry with the very rare active ability of Provoke, allowing him to taunt an enemy and manipulate their AI. His stats are good enough that he will be a perfectly serviceable unit for the entire game even without promotion, which is a good thing because his promotion requirements are ludicrously difficult to reach. Christine is your second ranged combatant, though she prefers to use the 1-range crossbow over 2-range bows on account of her low strength growth, since crossbows have a high enough base might to offset her low offensive stats. Compared to Sherlock, she outputs less damage, but is equally agile, and most importantly have active skills that can help correct the accuracy issues that plague your party in the early game of Berwick Saga. Note that her promotion, just like Elbert, is also quite difficult, and requires her to train for a while on bows, which is not necessarily her desired weaponry. She also uniquely has the ability to swap horses, which is the only way in Berwick Saga to switch a rider's mount without deleting the previous one, and she offers one of the few ways to heal horses in this game via Horse Lover. The two biggest challenges in this map lie in first overcoming the bridge guard, Banner. He is a ridiculously tanky armor knight for the first map, and must be defeated so your army can cross the bridge and enter the rest of the town. At this stage in the game, there really aren't a lot of fancy toys at your disposal to break through armor effectively. Simply pile all your units on and go for attrition. You will eventually win, even if it takes a few turns to do it. Banner may also be bypassed entirely to go around the North Hills, where a single enemy crossbow is standing by. This unit will never engage you actively until you enter his attack range. Killing this unit will drop some pocket change for your war funds as well. Either way you take to enter the town, the other concern on your mind should be the safety of Dean and Izerna. There will be a handful of soldiers actively chasing down both of them, but note that some of the deserters heading towards them aren't necessarily interested in fighting them. They are carrying some ill-gotten gains and are attempting to flee the map. Dean can be used to intercept them before they can flee to take the money for yourself, and he is also strong enough to face multiple enemies at once. But without Izerna's healing, he does risk death eventually. If you were to use Izerna, ensure that she can be kept safe, as the enemies will not be shy about pouncing on her if the opportunity presents itself. When all the threats on the map are cleared, you can then deal with Richens at your leisure. He will never move from the house, which means that rudimentary hit and run will eventually bring him down. Seizing the house will successfully save the village and end the first map. Reese will soon after enter the city of Navarone, the main hub for the rest of the game. Next video, we will dive into the side maps of Chapter 1 and some new faces around the city. See you soon.